Okay, so we will call our meeting to order at 6:30. The first item up on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to
the flag of the United States of America,
and the Republic
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, just bear with me since this is my first time kind of running the meeting from my house. I got a couple screens going, so I'm trying to make sure I keep track of the chats and everything. So the next item is agenda review. I don't have any adjustments. Do you, Julie?
No, I thought for a while we might have to, but we should be all set.
Chris?
Yes.
Julie, do we have an executive session tonight?
Yes, we do. We want to talk about the master agreement.
Okay, yeah, that's what it's all about. Thank you. Yep. Yes, thank you.
I guess I do have one agenda amendment because we don't have a space for public comments or correspondence, and I do have a correspondence to read.
Oh, good.
Just like last meeting, we'll kind of ground rules how the meeting will work. I do have a grid. I can see everyone. So whenever you're not talking, probably best to mute your mic. That way we don't get a lot of feedback. Whenever you do want to say something, just raise your hand, and I will call everybody as I see them. And if I'm not getting you, you can also send me a comment by chat because I have that open as well.
Chris, do we know who the person who's called in is?
No, I don't. How do I see that?
It's just a phone. Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, all you'll see is the phone number, so you'll have to ask that person to identify themselves or disconnect them.
Where do you see the phone number?
In the chat. I see it listed in the chat. I think it might be.
Oh, I see it. Okay.
It's Steve Scott. It's Steve Scott.
Steve, is that you on the phone?
Says he can't get his microphone to work.
There you go. Yeah, I'm not. Can you hear me now?
Absolutely. You've got
Yeah,
to we hear you.
I'm 5777.
Okay, so the person on the phone is our board member, Steve Scott.
We have I'm admitting her to the board meeting. And Steve, you better mute your microphone.
Sorry.
Here we go.
Okay. And it looks like we have Lisa Hango just joined us as well. So it would be audience. Okay, so on to public comment and correspondence. The correspondence I received was from Ty Schorner. And it's pretty short, so I'll just read it. He wrote, "Hey Chris, I may not be able to join the meeting tomorrow night, but I wanted to thank the staff at Highgate and MVU for the great job they have been doing with this remote learning. Also had just one question. Is there a reason that the MVU gate is locked on the weekends while the elementary school grounds are not? I think it would be nice if people could use MVU grounds responsible and social distance like is required. I know it would take the kids. I would take the kids to either rollerblade in the parking lot or ride bikes on the trail if it was open. Thank you again for all you do, Ty Schorner."
So that's a good point. We were having a conversation. The playgrounds are supposed to not be used because we can't sanitize them right now, yet it's open. We don't have gates, so people are going and using them, and our administrators have, we're not going out there and shooing children off the playground. I think we have to use common sense and hope that people are understanding that if they're using equipment, they're doing it on their own risk. Dan, I don't know if you have something you want to share about that, if you want somebody from MVU to get back to Ty about whatever your procedure is.
No, I just know that we've had reduced hours at MVU. So in other words, the building and the front gate have been closed right around 5:30 on weekdays. On weekends, I don't think there's anybody going into and do the rounds in the building like they had been. So I think it's been remained locked. If you guys want it opened up, I can talk to our custodians and have it opened up like we would normal hours during the weekday, if you guys would like to do that. I think the concern is, like Julie described, is, a bunch of softball players going out and playing softball, or a bunch of soccer players going out and playing soccer, and just not being socially distant, just not being responsible about it. That's the concern. But if you guys would like to have it open, we can certainly do that.
Chris, Don Collins. I think we stay with our current plan and see how that goes for another month or so. I think there's some real negative potential by opening up MVU in the grounds, other than the times we're already doing it.
Yeah. Anyone else want to weigh in? Seeing no one, I personally would agree with Don. I would like to give it a little more time to see how things work out before we open grounds up.
Okay, we'll keep it as is, and if something changes or if we get a different direction, please let us know.
Okay, thank you.
Chris, do you want us to reach out to Ty, or are you going to reach out to Ty?
I'm more than willing to email him. I can email him back as soon as we're done the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so moving on. Or is there any more public comments?
Did I see that Lisa Hango had joined us, Representative Lisa Hango?
She has joined us, yes.
Does she have any legislative update that regards what they might be doing for school budgets, knowing that we're in somewhat of a crisis situation with projected money, income, revenues versus expected expenses of the already passed school budgets?
If I have permission to speak, I might be able to just give you a very brief update.
Yes, go for it. I'm having a hard time hearing you, to be honest with you.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, I had my volume down. So just a quick update on that. Thanks for the question, Don. This is Representative Lisa Hango. I live in Berkshire, but I have permission to speak. I'm representing Highgate and Franklin also in this district at the State House. The education committees are working on that very budget right now. We're looking to pass a budget adjustment. We're looking to pass a very tiny budget for the first 3 months of the fiscal year for the state, which would be July, August, September. And then we're going to come back possibly mid-August to September for another look at the remaining 9 months of the budget. So this is very much money that's in flux right now because we don't know what's coming in. Municipalities have just been given an extension and a little more leeway in terms of collecting taxes. So we really don't know what we're going to have for funding, except we all know that we're seriously in the hole. So stay tuned. There is more to come. If you have specific questions that I can find answers for, please don't hesitate to email me. And thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chris, if it's okay, I just want to say Lynn Coda and I both have been getting regular steady updates from Lisa, questions about how things are going, very specific help. And I can't say enough, actually. Thank you.
Lisa's a former school board member, right?
I'm actually still a school board member in Northern Mountain Valley Union
right.
District. So Berkshire, Bakersfield, Sheldon, and Montgomery. So I'm really familiar with the challenges that you have. And thank you for the kind words, Julie. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to our consent agenda. And the first item on the consent agenda is approval of our minutes from April 7th. Do I have a first for approval of the minutes for April 7th?
I'll make.
Terry is a first.
I'll second.
And Devin's a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting the minutes of April 7th, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Or raise your hand, I should say. And against? Abstentions? By my count, it passes 9-0. Okay, on to presentations. First up is administrators. They provided written updates for us. They're in the Google Drives. Is there any questions on what was presented in the written drive?
Chris, I don't know whether, I know that we had talked about the continuation of learning, so I didn't know if Jen wanted to share just a minute of how that's going.
Sure.
Sure, I can do that. Hi, everyone. We surveyed both teachers and students last week, and I shared a slideshow summarizing the survey with Julie that she'll be able to share with you. We are finding that most of our students are engaged and participating, though we do have some students that are not. We have about a quarter of our students that we're pretty concerned about right now. A lot of the patterns that we see during the school year, we're seeing now, as much as student need varies during the normal school year, we're seeing the variety of student need right now as well. Some students are thriving and actually doing better than they were during the school year. And many students who struggled are still struggling or struggling more. And some students who were doing okay with us are now having a really hard time. So we're reaching out frequently. We have systems in place to make a contact with home. And we're plugging ahead and doing, I think we're doing okay. I think most of our students are doing okay. And we're going to continue to reach out to try to support those who have been less responsive.
Jen, this is Don Collins, and Dan too. Are you getting any parents who basically are just not cooperating? You getting many?
I haven't heard of any situations where parents have been not cooperating. I think most parents have been very supportive. We do have a handful of families that we have not been able to contact. Dan, I don't know if you have more to say on that.
I would say for the most part, most parents that I've spoken with are very supportive. They realize everybody's trying, everybody's in it together. I do hear of an occasional parent that is having real difficulty. Typically it's, I spoke to a parent just last week, single parent, 3 kids, trying to work, and just trying to make the whole situation go. And so I had reached out to the parent really concerned that I wasn't hearing a lot from her particular 8th grade student. And, and the parents just, I'm trying to work. I've got 3 kids with special needs, not a whole lot of education themselves. And just really kind of struggling with that type of thing. And so I provided some ways to get in touch. I know that the 8th grade English teacher in this particular situation called up the parent, spoke to the child on the phone, helped them go through how to do their constructive response and how to, kind of work with them that way. And I know the parent was very, very supportive of that and just very appreciative of it as well.
Good, Dan. And I asked the question because I know in some cases it's going to take some extra from the school district, like personnel, to motivate the parent to get the child to work. You'd hope by middle school that the child would be responsible enough, but.
What we have is we have people in place that'll reach out to parents in particular if they're not hearing. So if the kid's not engaging in the work, they'll let usually one of us know, and we'll reach out to the family as well and try to encourage them just to see what do they need. Are they having problems with internet? Are they having problems with resources? Do they need hard copies of stuff? Whatever that may be.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Jen.
Yep.
Peter.
Are you going to be going through the MVU remote learning survey now, or is that later on?
Jen, you could go through some highlights of it now if you wanted to. I just put it in their their folder.
Okay, I'm happy to take you through it a little bit. I'll present my screen if that works. So as I said, we surveyed teachers and students last week. When we surveyed teachers, I got about 59, I actually have 61 responses now, which is very inclusive of all of our classroom teachers. We asked specifically about participation, the office hours that we're providing, and we have a weekly advisory meeting that's happening on Mondays for both high school and middle school. So one of the first questions that we asked was, what percentage of your students are submitting the learning activities that you are asking them to do? We have a small percentage of students, or excuse me, of teachers who are saying that less than half of their students are submitting the work that's being asked of them. I think one of the concerns that we are going to work on addressing in the next week is how students are approaching their core classes, their math, science, literacy, and social studies versus some of their elective classes. I think that there's a little bit of a discrepancy there that we want to try to support a little bit more completion in the high school, and particularly of the graduation requirements in the arts and PE and whatnot. I'm not going to read through all these quotes here, but these are some of the positive things that teachers identified that have been happening since remote learning. As I mentioned, some students who were not as engaged or as vocal during the regular school year have been building relationships with teachers and are participating more, which is encouraging. We offer office hours Tuesday through Friday. All teachers have an hour of the day when they're available to help and take questions. These have not really been widely used by students yet, as you can see from the graph. So we're making some adjustments to the schedule. It's still an important piece that we offer so that students can get live help. And we've been encouraging teachers to direct students toward office hours, because sometimes getting help through email is not easy. A lot can be lost in that language, but students are using email as their primary way to get the help that they need. Our Monday Nest and Prime Group meetings are every Monday. There's a half an hour where those advisory groups get together. We've had fairly high participation in these sessions, which they've been going pretty well. You know, some typical high school hijinks in a few of them, but we've been trying to work with those teachers to help prevent those from happening again. But this is also really dependent upon grade level. I think the middle school, grade 9 and 10, have very high participation. And then the older students, many of them are working increased hours, which is making it harder for them to participate in events that are happening at set times. And this is at a set time. I help with a 12th grade nest, and there's usually about 5 or 6. So only about half of the students are able to participate at the time that we have it on Mondays. We play games. This week we had a scavenger hunt, and we've played some categories, which is fun. Student survey I sent out on Friday. I have about 300 responses, which I'm thrilled with. I think that's a really nice representative example of our students. We asked a lot of different things. We asked about workload, the things that they do to get help, the challenges that they're facing, how motivated they feel. We asked for suggestions about how to make things better. And the responses, there's a wide range of responses, as you can imagine. So when we asked about the workload, about a quarter of students said that the workload is really overwhelming. That's the red section on the chart. And then a lot of students said, about 39% said that it has depended on the class, which makes perfect sense. I know that we're trying to support different content areas, particularly math is challenging to instruct remotely right now. How are we supporting those teachers and students in that area? So I think the variability depending on content area is something that we're still trying to work through. We did allow students to provide their own answers here as an other option. So that's why there's lots of extra little colors on the right-hand side there. And then the small orange section is just students who felt the workload was too light. So that was a very small portion of students who felt like there was too little work to do right now. We asked students what was going well, and again, a wide range from nothing to everything. So as I said, some students are really enjoying the opportunity. I think that they are appreciating some of the freedom that they have to sleep in a little later, to make their own schedule, to work in the morning and then have some free time in the afternoon, to work in their bedroom, to take breaks when they want. I think that for high schoolers in particular, that level of freedom and independence, I think a lot of them are appreciating that right now. We asked students what they do when they need help. And so they were able to check all of the answers that applied. So you can see from this that most students are reaching out by email to their teachers and making arrangements that way, which I think at first was very overwhelming for students and teachers. But I've heard from both students and teachers more recently that the email flow is a little less overwhelming than it was perhaps when we started. A lot of them are also using other online tools or reaching out to family members. We asked students what's making it challenging to do your schoolwork right now. So you can see we have a significant samples of kids who, indicated that their internet's not reliable. I imagine that number is higher considering this was an online survey. There's a portion of our population that wouldn't even have been able to complete the survey. We have a lot of juniors and seniors who are working increased hours at their jobs to help support their families. And so we're trying to work with those students to make sure that they're able to balance both school and work. We have a lot of kids who are watching their siblings or other children who are in their home. But the big things that are really challenges for students right now are center around executive functioning skills like organization and time management and staying away from distractions. The same things that are making it challenging for me to work at home as well right now are making it challenging for students to do their schoolwork at home. And then we're going to continue to work on the directions piece. When I think about how many times teachers rephrase directions for students during a class period, both for the whole group, but also for individual students, it doesn't surprise me that students are expressing that the directions are not clear. So we're going to work on continuing to improve that. We asked about motivation and how their motivation has changed since the dismissal. A small portion of students say that they're actually more motivated to do schoolwork. And then most students say that their motivation is about the same or slightly less. We are concerned about that 22% of students who are expressing that they're much less motivated now. I'm going to sort that data and share it with our school counseling and student affairs department so we can reach out to those students and help support them better. And then we asked how we could improve the experience for students. And so I took a couple of quotes from there. And like I said, I won't read through them right now. They have got some good suggestions that we'll try to incorporate as best we can within the limits that we have.
So I just like to follow up. So, working from home isn't my preferred way to work either. And I always knew that about myself. And but that's the reality we're in, and I'm working through that as well. So a lot of students, and I know one in particular that faces that same challenge. So I'm just a couple of things. It's and I think motivation is the big organization, motivation, time management, things that are needed to work remotely or go to school remotely. One of the suggestions on here that that this student thought was important was feedback, grades, pass, fail. How are we doing? Because if the teacher's showing that we're not doing as well as we think we're doing, or as well as they should be doing, that may create some motivation to do better.
Absolutely. And so one of the tasks that we've asked teachers to do this week is provide feedback to students about where they are and how they're doing. So we had received some feedback like this survey, but other pieces of information that students had shared with teachers about them not feeling like they were sure about if they were meeting expectations. So we made an expectation this week that teachers would, by the end of the week, share with their students where they are in terms of progress. Are they meeting the expectations, or are there things that they need to improve? And our instructional coaches are helping to support the teaching teams to give them ideas and tools to share that progress. I know that one of the things that we usually use, PowerSchool, to communicate progress is not the best tool for us right now, considering the situation. Because the grading and feedback has changed significantly. So we aren't able to use PowerSchool like maybe we would have been able to, or that we would have if we were still in session normally.
And I think another point that you've already made too is, as far as workload and overload, is certainly dependent on class. From what I'm hearing, some are much more difficult than others. And math being one.
Yep, most definitely.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Okay. I don't see anyone else with a question, so I believe at this time we can move on to the superintendent update.
Absolutely. So I have too many tabs open, so forgive me. I wanted to touch base on a few things. In your report, you also have an update from Kosha. Maybe she can give a quick update when I'm finished about the continuation of learning in the elementary schools. But right now, I just wanted to update you on sort of where we are around next steps. With the COVID-19 crisis that we're going through. We are still waiting for guidance from the Agency of Ed. It's coming on Friday, we've been told for weeks, about end of year celebrations, graduations, 6th grade celebrations, those kinds of activities. We gave superintendents and other stakeholders gave input to Dan French by last Friday, and we meet with Dan French in a Zoom conversation as superintendents every Thursday, and he's given us little previews of that. But what we do know is that by Friday we will know the parameters around which we can hold graduations. We've been having conversations, MVU's been having conversations, hoping to plan an in-person regular graduation, an alternate on-site graduation, virtual graduation, knowing that any of those things can happen. The indications we're getting is it's not going to look like a regular graduation. I think that's pretty safe to say. I also believe we're going to be pretty clearly told what we can and can't do rather than given suggestions. So whatever we do will be consistent with continued social distancing guidelines. So we've also been told that guidance on Friday is going to give an indication about summer school, summer programs, camps, etc. We have a group of administrators, central office, and folks who work in summer programming, and we're coming together on Monday so that we can do sort of a think tank day around summer school. Carol, who I think you probably saw, had submitted, she's leaving us at the end of this year, but she's working tirelessly with other 21st century coaches around the guidance they're getting. It's pretty clear they're being told that they can't have more than 5 children anywhere with 2 adults at any time. So we're going to be looking at all the possibilities. Dan French has indicated to superintendents, curriculum directors, I think principals as well, that, how did he put it? We should be using the summer to target and intervene with kids who are struggling, to ensure that kids who are having a difficult time, whether it's with their executive functioning and time management, or whether it's internet access, that we really work with those kids as well and families, because the expectation is without a vaccine, summer will lead into a fall that will likely still look different. Not necessarily the same as it is now. We don't know that. They are taking things one step at a time, but they're definitely letting us know we should use our summer wisely, because barring a vaccine, we will likely not have school as usual in the fall. That's not news anyone is interested in hearing. I think Dan and Jen can attest to our admin team. When I previewed that information last Friday, that was not a happy tone that was set. But I think we have to be planful. The emails and interactions I've been having with all the principals really keep centering on everybody wants to plan. We're all planners. We're all very organized people. And the waiting to see is very difficult. But behind the scenes, people are having a lot of planning conversations. So we should be able to come to you with next steps pretty shortly. Laura may want to jump in here, but the last part, I think Lisa highlighted very well. We have a pretty dire financial outlook for FY21. I'm hearing less about the state not funding us, but I do know the state is worried about where the funding is going to come. We're watching our hires carefully, but as you all know, our board very thoughtfully reduced positions to just right size in our district. And so we're being, as people leave, we're looking at those positions, but we're very cognizant of the fact that we don't want to understaff our school either. So we will continue to pay attention to the Joint Fiscal Office information and the CARES Act. I mean, one great example, all of this money that's coming into the state from the CARES Act, they're still not entirely sure how we can use that money. The money is not going to the ed fund directly, it's coming to school districts. And so, for example, if we can't get the same amount of special ed revenue that we usually get, we may be able to use CARES funding to offset the loss of that revenue, because the special ed services were different because of the COVID stay-at-home order. So those pieces are to be worked through both at the state level and locally. We get guidance every single day and we go through it. It's kind of where we are at the moment. On a more positive note, does anyone mind if I change the subject? Megan's shaking her head. We went through our first elementary school choice process. We had 8 applicants. We were able to match all 8 applicants with their school of choice. It was essentially 50-50 of families choosing Franklin or Swanton. The majority of those were really kids entering kindergarten. We had only one family that's not true. We had one student leaving Swanton to go to Franklin and one family leaving Highgate to go to Franklin. But we essentially had families who had moved and wanted to stay where they are, or they had a connection to the school previously. So we were very lucky. Swanton is a very full school. So I was a little worried that people would choose a class. We have one class in particular that's chock-a-block full. And that was not the class where we had folks trying to enroll. So that worked out really well. Everybody got the options that they wanted. It went smoothly and families were really happy.
So Julie, net enrollment on Franklin gained 2.
4.
Gained 4. Okay.
Yes.
And Swanton, Highgate?
It really was a wash.
Okay.
I mean, 4 students chose Swanton. Some of those students are entering kindergarten. They're already in preschool in Swanton. So it's not really a loss. Maybe
Right.
a family moved to Highgate. They'd never been to Highgate, but they wanted to stay in Swanton. Those kinds of, we didn't really have a big loss in one school or the other, which was good to see.
Thank you.
Yep. So that is my update. I know Wendy has a homeless update in the report, and Kosha had a quick update on how the distance learning feedback was so far for the elementary school.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Just to quickly let you know that we are finding at the K-6 schools, most of the parents and students are finding the work manageable, and the response from parents has been very positive so far. So students are sending in work. We are getting more work from kids coming back to teachers. So those are all positive signs. Teachers are still concerned about students who struggled before the closure of schools. Those students are continuing to struggle, and some are struggling even more. The interventionists and special educators are reaching out to those students who have been receiving support prior to school closures, and they're helping as much as they can. I think the biggest concern is from students who are not responding at all. And just like Jen mentioned, the principals receive notification by Friday if there are students who have not sent in any work or made any contact, and principals are reaching out via phone. There have been some principals who've even visited homes to find out what's going on. I think the biggest concern for teachers right now is our little kids, the kindergarten, first, second graders who don't learn that well when their teacher's not there. And so they are especially concerned with kindergarten, first grade when the kids are just learning to read because they're not getting reading instruction from their teachers, as well as they're just learning to do math. So those are the big concerns. And, you know, I keep telling the coaches and teachers, this is a very unusual situation. And right now, you know, our big concern is to feed our kids, make sure that they are well fed and that they are feeling safe and healthy, and that they will learn to read, maybe not this year, but next year. So just trying to keep that in perspective, that, right now the priorities are a little different. The teachers are continuing to send out lessons via video. They are sending out pre-recorded lessons so that parents have access to these lessons and can have the students watch them whenever it's convenient to the family. Teachers are also meeting in their professional learning communities every week, and they're planning together. So in the event that a teacher from their grade level team is sick or is unable to participate, those students will still receive their lessons. The teachers have done a great job of learning how to video record themselves, how to send out these lessons. Most of them are using Google Classroom to push out lessons. In Highgate, they're using Seesaw. Some teachers in Swanton are using Dojo for the younger kids. And so they're doing the very best they can. So for the most part, everybody seems to be doing well. And we know that the students who have needs, academic needs, are going to continue needing that support and even more. As Julie said, we still don't have enough information to plan our summer tutoring, but every year we offer tutoring to students who have academic struggles. And I have already reached out to Tiffany Renadette, who is our coordinator for Highgate and Swanton, and she is already reaching out to all the tutors and asking who would be interested in doing some tutoring over the summer. So even if we cannot have children come in person to schools, we would be able to offer some virtual tutoring. So that's the report from the elementary schools.
Chris, I have a question.
Sure.
I believe you said at the end of this week, all parents will be notified of their children's progress. Is that the case, that everybody's going to get a progress report on how their child is doing? No?
Jen, do you want to clarify that?
That was something I had said, Dawn. What I said is that we've asked teachers to communicate with students their progress.
Right.
Not something as formal as a progress report right now. More like using the tools like Google Classroom or email to let students know where they stand. I think for the most part, students who are engaging have been getting feedback from their teachers. I'm sure that feedback's a challenge right now. But no, we're not doing a formal progress report. I'm not sure. It would take a lot of
I really wasn't asking for a formal progress report. And I did understand what you said, but I thought Kasha also said, maybe it was a principal, but somebody was going to be contacting parents.
Oh.
Yes, for those students who have not made any contact with their teachers, so they haven't emailed, they haven't submitted work at all during the week, those names are given to the principals by Friday, and then the principals are taking on the task of contacting those families if they have not heard from those students during the week.
Okay, so and that's good. And I guess that's why I was asking for clarification. But what about the next group of students who maybe have made contact but are struggling? Are they going to get any message? I mean, a parent might think, gee, we've been spending an hour or two a day, seems to be going all right, but yet from the school's end, the response really isn't showing any academic progress. I wondered if there's a plan to be in contact with those parents. I'm not asking everybody to send a report on every kid. I just want to know what is happening in case we hear concerns in the community.
Absolutely. So like I said, the interventionists and special educators have contacted all the students that they were working with prior to school closures. And teachers are reaching out more frequently to students who need that reassurance and support. So on Mondays, the teachers are supposed to contact every child in their classroom, whether it's via email, video chat, phone call. And then they found that some of the kids need more frequent chats with their teachers. So they're calling those kids 3 times a week. There are some kids who they're calling every day. So the teachers have figured out which students really need that daily contact, and they're reaching out based on what the students and families need.
Good. And I want to thank both you and Jen, because what I don't want to see is parents saying in the summer, well, we thought everything was going great, So it's good that we're having that contact, at least so we get a sense, are they making progress? Thank you very much, both of you.
You're welcome.
Chris, I don't know if Wendy, it's very brief, but just the impact of COVID-19 on homelessness in our region.
Yes. So as we know, during regular times, students and families experiencing homelessness, regular school is a challenge. So it's not a surprise that the current situation can be more challenging for families who are experiencing homelessness. We reached out to families right at the get-go to make sure they knew how to access meals for the free meals for children up to age 18, including families who are residing outside of our county in Chittenden County, to make sure those families knew who to contact for the local schools to sign up for meals. We've reached out to each teacher of every child that's been identified as homeless, and checked in with each teacher to see how it's going. Are they hearing back from the students? And the celebration is many are hearing back. So the next step was to reach out and see, are there things that the families, that the children and families need right now to ensure that continues. And so we were able to work with a few families that have identified some basic needs that fell under the McKinney-Vento grant that we have. And we were able to get things for the family, for the students and families pretty quickly right into their hands. So we are keeping track. We are using teachers to maintain an idea of how they are doing, and working with building administrators. We are still receiving referrals of families and expect that that will likely increase. Families are reaching a threshold. It would seem last week we had 2 new referrals, and it's some of the things that are being referred are, relationship issues amongst parents. They've kind of reached a boiling point. And so the referrals are coming in, they're being handled quickly, and resources are going to families and students that need that.
Thank you. So at this point, I think while we're on it, we'll move right on to the technology director update.
Thanks, Chris. I am going to present, because I'm taking a fairly complex situation but a bunch of information. Hold on just a second. There we go. And trying to make it understandable in a short amount of time. So you should see the slide coming up if it's up. Just the first thing is regarding, just in general, cyber criminals are loving these times, COVID times. And the message that I've been trying to send for the last week or so, 2 weeks, is if nothing else, change your password. Just a couple of hints in there, trying to change a password to like a phrase with misspellings in it, numbers, caps, special characters. A longer password is better, something 10 characters or more. And here's the real kicker on passwords is, regardless of the system, whether it's your home email, your work email, your banking account, don't use the same password in multiple places. That's one of the biggest no-nos, and people do it constantly. And that's how, a security threat from one company affects another. And then that's the big one there. Consider a password manager like LastPass if you want. And then finally on that, don't click links, download files from emails if you're not expecting them and you aren't 100% sure that they're safe. In the last couple of weeks, we've had a couple of high-level situations that I want to address, and stop me and ask questions along the way. I'll also wait at the end for questions. I'm sure there will be some. The first one was an employee email was spoofed, meaning emails were sent making it look like it was from an employee, but it really wasn't. They gained some of that person's information, and they gained access to our direct deposit form, and tried to get access to direct deposit check. Now, nothing was actually transferred, but that was the first one. And the second one, our financial server has been repeatedly hit by brute force attacks, and I'll explain that in just a little bit. But those are the two situations. In the first one, an email request included a signed request by the spoofer. At this point, the business office does not process requests without a paper copy. So they wouldn't take action on this. They connect directly with the employee and with IT. And one other message there is something like this happening. We're trying to tell people not to reply to those emails, but to reach out to the person in another form, either by phone, in a different email, but not hitting reply and getting back to a person. So that was the first security breach. And in that case, we have increased our policies in our Gmail to include spoofed warnings and rejecting of certain messages. And you might see, I know you can't read it on this slide, I've got another one. You might see some of these warnings come across in your email. So if you see headers like this, and a lot of people are, you probably have, Gmail is trying to tell you that this comes from outside the domain. It probably has something spoofed in it. And the second one is actually really interesting, where spammers or cyber criminals will take an email that looks very similar to the email, maybe just a slight misspelling, and try to get it past our system. So you might see these messages. If you do, obviously delete is the first thing, never reply. You can contact me, contact a tech person at any school, but these messages are blocked from our domain, from Gmail. On the second security breach or security attempt, just a quick history on the Tyler server, the financial server. In 2018, right before Thanksgiving, we had some corrupted disks and backups, and we lost about a week's worth of time. This was not a security breach. This was just a server error. At that time, we hired the tech group, a firm out of Williston, Burlington area. They installed a new server, and they handle monitoring and backup of that server. So instead of losing a week's worth of work, we're at most losing 2 hours worth of work. Part of their work included virtualizing the server, a little tech jargon, but really just means that one server is virtually 3 separate and distinct servers. So there's no interaction. So if somebody gets onto one server, they don't automatically have access to a second server. And that's a key thing that'll come up in a minute. This is not a cheap service. Tech Group is fairly expensive, but it is an invaluable service. I want to make sure that we understand that without that, we would be in dire straits financially. About 4 or 5 months ago, we had an employee who made a mistake, and we lost a couple hours worth of work. Not a big deal. They went back to the backup, and they recovered us within a half a day, and we were back in business. Last week, our server was hit by brute force attacks. This is where an electronic attempt is made at thousands and thousands of times to try different passwords on an account. And if you see the last line there, I've got 181,000 attempts. We went into the server on one day, and they had the tech group had installed a monitor, and we saw that they had 30,000 attempts. And then the next day it was at 181,000 attempts. So just repeatedly trying different passwords and just different combinations to get into the server. We have lockout rules on there now. And at this point, we are installing, or we have most employees using a VPN to connect to the Tyler server. Again, we didn't lose any data, separate servers. So the databases were on a different server that weren't affected. But we did have downtime with the business folks. So they lost a little bit of time without that access. And Laura could speak up to that, but again, no data loss is the key here. We didn't have any data affected by any of this. Our key takeaways I want to talk about is, first of all employees have been asked to change passwords in their accounts. You probably have seen those emails. As soon as server work is and firewall work is done tomorrow, I will ask that again. I will ask employees to change their passwords. Anybody that has access to the Tyler server has been asked to change their password. We're going to lock down the MVU server so they can't get on without a VPN client. Basically, that means that they'll not be able to log in. So they'll be emailing me and I'll make sure that they have the VPN client running. VPN is just a virtual private network, which just means that if you're running a VPN client, it's like your machine is in MVU, is at MVU server. So you're on-site MVU, and we can block all other traffic when you're on a VPN. Even with a VPN, we're asking people to change their remote access passwords. We're asking them not to save credentials in their software preferences. This is a biggie. So if you're on a website and you're saving a password, if you're in a program and you save a password, that's a security risk. A lot of people do that. They forget their passwords. They just let the computer save it for them. I'm guilty of that with certain things too. And that's why I use a password manager for my own stuff. So a lot safer. We're asking them to log out of remote desktop. And then the last one there, D, this is a big one. Keep your device updated. So run your Windows updates, run your Mac updates, run your browser updates. They usually are automatic. Have an anti-malware, antivirus software in place. They're not expensive, and they're just invaluable again. A lot of information in a couple of minutes, but I'm wondering if people have questions. If you don't, I do have some questions at the bottom for you to ask yourself. You don't need to answer out loud, but just some questions for you to think about. Like, when did you last change your email password? How about your bank login, credit card logins? Do you save your credentials on a browser? Do you run your updates? Do you know if your antivirus and anti-malware is updated and run routinely? Just some questions to think about on your own side, and this is the kind of thing that anybody accessing the Tyler, so our business HR people are going through at this moment. So that's just a quick overview. I'll make sure Julie has this slideshow available for people to ask questions. But if you have questions right now, feel free to ask them.
Robert, I had it on my screen, but some way I have lost it. But you said there is a plan. What'd you say for passwords? You just said you have password protection. I'm just trying to see.
Yep. I'll go back to it. I think it was way back. Might have been way back at the beginning. So making a complex password, is that what you're talking about, Don?
No, it looked like it was a service LastPass. Consider a password manager.
Yep.
Okay.
So if you have a lot of passwords, and you know, a lot of people write them down on sticky notes and they try to have browsers remember them. Something like LastPass will record all your passwords and you have one master password, and that's what you use to get into all of your other sites.
Okay. Does that provide a protection, a level of protection?
Yes.
That I don't have now because my wife has a little book with a red cover on it and probably 20 different passwords for banks and other things.
Yeah. LastPass is more of a protection if you, instead of writing those things in your book, if you're saving them on your computer, if you're saving them in web browsers and applications, which a lot of people do, that's where LastPass really shines.
Okay.
So you save them in LastPass instead of in the browser, basically.
All right. Thank you very much, Robert.
Sure. And I did want to skip to the very end and make sure that I recognize a couple of people. Hopefully I don't skip by the last slide. Well, it comes up. So first of all, the business folks, Laura and her team, have been very patient, very vigilant, watching things and reporting them to me, which is really important. Technology is only as secure as the people using it. And that's a message that rings very clear day in, day out right now, especially. Sue Day, just a personal shout out to her. She busted butt to get her payroll done in between server up, server down. I'd tell her, okay, you've got 2 hours to work on stuff and I've got to take it back down. And she would work and, you know, late at night, Saturday night, Sunday morning. So just nice job there. And then again, Sylvia Gagne, once again, acting as our system administrator only because we house our financial server at MVU, so she feels personally responsible for it. Without Sylvia, there's no way I could get what I do done. There's just no way. Her assistance and her expertise, especially when she's on site, just outstanding. And then working with the tech group, Josh Roulette specifically, we've been working personally with him on each of these situations. Very patient, very persistent, very responsive, much better than a lot of tech support people that I've worked with over the years. So I just wanted to give those shout outs.
Where are they located, Robert?
I believe it's Williston. Maybe Laura knows exactly. Williston, Colchester, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's Williston, but I'm not sure exactly where. Yeah.
So they're near. They're geographically.
And I've worked with them in the past. I'm sorry?
I said I was just asking because I wondered if they were geographically close by. I know we don't do face-to-face anymore, even when we don't have a virus, but I was hoping they were a Vermont organization, not something out of California or Chicago.
Yes, they are. And I've used them in the past, other districts, and they've always been tremendous.
Good.
And I just want to thank Robert because the time and effort he's put into this, and the business office, he says we're patient, but we're really not. We blow up his email, his phone, his messaging, his Google chats. It doesn't matter. We just go at him at every different direction. So he's put in time, again, at night, weekends. This doesn't happen when you want it to happen, or if you ever want it to happen, it happens on Sunday nights, or when it's, payroll needs to happen, or there's like this week, we're doing a pre-audit. So Robert deserves a big round of applause on how he handles that.
I haven't been bored.
No, Robert, it's been tremendous. Last year, you had a really tough year with the Tyler server that you just made one little bullet on this presentation, but it was huge. It was like you were holding the thing together, you and Sylvia, with your bare hands for several weeks. And this has just been terrible. So I can't say enough about you and our team and how just tirelessly you work to make sure that our servers are secure and that our staff are able to do their job.
Yeah, again, these things are kind of like buying antivirus or buying insurance on stuff. We don't realize until something hits how very important the financial server is and how much money goes through that on a annual basis. So very important to make sure we're taking care of those things. And Julie, I'll make sure that you have a copy of this to put into the drive.
Thank you, Robert.
Sure.
Is there any questions? At this point, I can't see everybody, so now I can. So is there any questions about the presentations?
It was a good presentation, very worthwhile.
Thank you.
Seeing no questions, we can move on to new business. First up is Educational Support Staff Agreement. Possible adoption.
So I can't see, there's Jen, I can see her. Jen and Peter and Terry and Lauren Pierrette and I have spent a lot of evenings together this spring working with the association. We have come to an agreement as of last Thursday that we met? Last week. And we've been going, the support staff representative, Kelly Rainville, and I have been going back and forth on the written document. We finalized that agreement today about 5 o'clock, and I expect them to gather together and ratify shortly. I don't have a timeline on that. But it was very positive, and we're very pleased that we were able to settle with them. To go into details, as these agreements are confidential until such time as they're ratified, we would need to go into executive session at the end of the meeting to discuss the details of the agreement at that time. Jen, Terry, Peter, I don't know if you have anything you want to add.
I don't have anything to add. Thank you, Julie, and thank you and Pierrette and everybody for your support, helping us and being with us, and Laura.
Yeah, I would like to add something if I may, and that is that was my first time doing one of those, and it was amazing to me how calm and caring and compassionate and smart and just great negotiating that I saw going on there. So thank you all. It was great. I think they felt really respected too. Thank you.
So that's always our hope, obviously, for people to feel respected and heard in this process.
Yeah.
Before we vote on this, I think I would like to go into executive session to discuss some of the details of it, as it may pertain also to the professionals negotiations as well.
Absolutely.
So seeing no other questions at this point, we'll move on to stormwater parking lot project.
Laura, I'm going to let you start on this one. Laura lives the stormwater parking lot project.
Well, it's moving forward, so that's a positive. For a while there, we weren't sure exactly how it was going to end up, but we did hire a third-party engineering firm, Ruggiano Engineering, Tyler Mumley, to kind of help us make sure that our best interests were being looked after throughout the process. And so, as of today, I actually just sent Chris the grant agreement for about $130,000 with the state of Vermont to get that stormwater project going in Highgate, which would happen at the same time as their parking resurfacing project. So we're moving forward, hopefully, and that project will happen this summer.
And Laura, there's no match in this grant.
No match, no.
Has the RFP and RFQ been drafted and sent out yet?
We were waiting to execute this grant, so that's why we were pushing to get it within that 2-week period that we had really kind of held Amanda to at the state level. So as soon as that's done, I know Ruggiano is ready to file that permit application and the and get that RFP launched.
And that's just a matter of me signing those grants now, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So Chris and Laura, last month when we looked at the April meeting about a month ago, there were some real concerns. Those concerns have been resolved.
We've worked through those. We've met a couple times since then. Chris has been a part of those meetings along with Tyler Mumley from Ruggiano and Julie, myself, Scott, the facility director there. And yes, I think we've problem solved all of those concerns. Yes. So
Chris, is the size appropriate?
Well, one of the issues we had is there was a little miscommunication between Tyler and myself about the design on the drains, and the difference is when we originally looked to do the parking lot project 4 years ago, we were doing it based on a once in 10-year event. These plans are based on a once in a 1-year event, which that means is it's a rainstorm that's typical to happen once a year. We were looking at more at a rainstorm that's more typical to happen once in every 10 years. Well, the issue we had, or I had with it, is if it rains, our parking lot floods, everybody says we wasted all this money, a lot of negative, feedback would come from that. So by talking and working with Tyler on it, he explained that, yes, there might be some ponding in an event that is an extreme event, but it wouldn't last. I mean, it would, within 24 hours, it'd be all gone and it wouldn't even be an issue. So we were able to work through the design and it fits what we need a lot better than I originally thought.
Okay, good. As long as you're comfortable with it, because I know if you go down to Dollar General in Swanton, they have a ponding that never goes away, and I don't want that kind of thing. The Highgate School. Good. As long as you're comfortable, Chris, that's great.
Right, that was my concern, and because we have pond. I mean, every time it rains, the Highgate parking lot has a pond in it for a month. So that was my concern. I just didn't want to have a continued puddle in our parking lot. But they said that this would go away very quickly on an extreme event. You know, on a normal just rainstorm, we wouldn't get any ponding, so it's not an issue. You know, and then you have your January thaws and stuff like that. We might get some ponding then, but the design calls for the catch basins to catch this water to be out in the areas we're plowing. So theoretically, in a January thaw, we shouldn't have ice build up because we're maintaining these plowed areas.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. So, not seeing any questions on stormwater, I guess we can move on to resignation, FYI.
Yes, in your folder, you'll see a resignation from Carol Lazat. Carol Lazat has been the after-school 21st century coordinator of our after-school programs for many years. She let me know she was going to be retiring this winter, and then wanted to hold off. She submitted her resignation to me and shared it with the admin team right before we all closed school down. She's planning on retiring, and her plans have shifted a little bit because of the pandemic. We have a candidate that we have interviewed, and the team agrees that she's absolutely wonderful. And to replace Carol, she's coming from New Hampshire as Associate Dean of and Director of New England Art College. They've changed the name of the college several times, so I do apologize for not coming up with the name, and I don't have it pulled up in front of me. Her name's Beth Ann Miller. We're very excited about her candidacy. So we will likely work with Carol to do some overlap for some training, particularly since this summer will be challenging, to say the least. It will likely will have a combination of virtual and in-person opportunities for students, but we still don't know what that will look like. So we are happy for Carol because she had some exciting plans, but we're gonna miss her leadership. And this is a program she's grown from a smaller program to a very large. We receive about $500,000 in grant funding to serve a large percentage of our kids, many of whom are at risk. So we wish her well.
Julie, is the funding for that fairly safe?
We've been told that the funding is, well, we just received the grant, and it's Laura, 3-year grant, I think. Yeah, so what we understand is there are some amendments and some processes we'll have to go through because we're clearly not serving students in the same way that we were. But Carol is somebody whose expertise really helps us with that. So she helps us navigate those waters.
Okay, that's great news, because I know at one time there was some concerns about funding.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. So seeing no questions, we'll move on to old business. First up is check warrants.
I believe Devin had to step away, and Steve had sent me an email asking, I think, Megan or someone else to read the check warrants because he was having a hard time being able to speak. But the check warrants are in the in the shared drive. I'm sorry. The check warrants are for the month of April, and the amount is $2,520,332.08.
So at this point, I'd entertain a motion to accept the check warrants, and we'll see if we can get Megan to read them.
Yeah, I can make that motion. So I just need to open it in the Google Drive, Laura?
Yes. There's a cover page, and then there's the backup for it in a separate attachment. Or I can try to present. It's up to you.
Give me one sec. I have too many Gmail accounts. It's saying I don't have permission, even with my MVSD account.
I can share it. I already have things up, so if you want, I can
Okay,
share
thank
the
you.
screen, and there we go. Okay. Can you see that, Megan?
Yes. All right. So make a motion to accept the warrants for the month of April 2020. Accounts payable total of $518,225.18. Payroll checks $47,746.64. Payroll with other disbursements $1,445,389.65. Deductions of $508,970.61 for a total of $2,520,332.08.
Okay, so at this time we have a first with Megan. Do we have a second? And because Laura's presenting, I can't see everybody. So
oh, I'm sorry.
Chris, I'll second it. Don Collins.
Don was a second. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of accepting the check warrants as read, raise your hand. Against? Motion carries 9-0. Next up is financial update.
Okay. There's also a financial report in the shared drive. I won't project it unless someone wants me to. It shows pretty small. I'll just hit a couple highlights since you haven't seen one in a while. The first 4 pages, I believe, is your revenue pages. And then you get into your expenditures in the back, keeping in mind that your revenues are broken down by location. Expenditures are all consolidated into one in this report, but revenues are broken down by location. Overall, we've received most of our revenues. So we've received all of our state aid. We've received our SEER money, or our special ed reimbursement money that we will be receiving for the year unless they do a final reconciliation. Overall, revenues are up a couple $100,000 from where we anticipated them being. So unless something changes between now and June 30, due to this COVID situation, the revenue should be in pretty good shape here at MVSD. As far as expenditures, we've been working really hard here in the business office to try to reconcile all the outstanding requisitions and POs. We've asked administration to work with all of their staff members as far as what they were anticipating needing prior to the COVID situation, and then what that now looks like in their school. A lot of requisitions and purchase orders have been eliminated or adjusted or reduced. And that's for things that as supplies, equipment, and also some facility stuff. Obviously, without kids in the building, you don't need as much toilet paper or soap or those kinds of things. So we continue to work through that. Right now, our message, even given the current situation, if you take a look at the expenditures right now, we're anticipating under expending our budget by about $2.2 million. That number grew significantly over the last month or so. We've looked at reducing any contracts that we can. For instance, today we got an email from NCSS that they were willing to reduce, or that they actually have reduced some of our service contracts. We're paying a majority of those contracts for services because students are still receiving a lot of those services, but LEAP contracts, and I guess Tanya could probably let you know what those are, but they've reduced those. Any transportation portions of those contracts for out-of-district placements have been eliminated. So where we can, we are reducing those costs. So our message right now is that we are only purchasing items for fiscal year 20, which is the year we're in, that are absolutely necessary until we have more information about the financial situation and what's going to be allowable as far as carryover, or what the solution is going to be to the revenue issue of $150 million for next year. I have kind of put people on notice that that may change if we get information from the state saying that they're going to apply for that waiver as far as how we can use carryover funds, or they're going to borrow money at the state level to address that revenue issue next year. We may move forward with some purchasing for next year ahead of time with some of this carryover now, which we're perfectly allowed to do. It's just very difficult to make those decisions or advise on that right now. So I'm asking people to be as patient as they can and give us a little bit more time to receive that guidance. Hopefully some will come on Friday, maybe the following week. But right now we're in the best shape that I think we can be in going into a really bad situation. And that's because the administration has been very responsible working with their staff.
Julie and Laura, is it your intent, we're going to be meeting in 2 weeks and then again in June, but at some point just to take a block of time and talk about where maybe we have saved money and what the options might be to prepare us for what's coming after July 1?
That's my plan, Dawn. Unfortunately, I mean, if we can have that conversation at the next meeting this month, I'd love to have that conversation. It may not happen until the first week in June, but.
Were you on the webinar yesterday? Were you on the webinar?
Oh, yeah.
I was, and I had a good cry after, Dawn.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know how many board members who were on it, but I know that Julie was. I figured you probably were, but you know, it's just such a moving target, and sooner or later, tough decisions are going to have to be made at the state level. And I know we will be, but it'd be just good for all the board members at some point to know where we are. And because we're going to have to do some really quick dancing, I think, at some point, maybe even a special meeting, but good. I figured you were there, but I just wanted to bring it up with the full board there listening tonight that some big decisions are going to be made that are going to impact us. Thank you.
Agreed.
Terry. And Peter after.
I have a question about, Laura, if we have money, I was on that webinar yesterday too, and it's on the VSBA, I think, or maybe it's not there. I think it's on there already if anybody wants to catch it. But would they take that money away from us? Can they do that? Can they give us less? Because they're going to look at people and say, okay, talking about need, that they might say, hey, you can't, and then when I say they, I mean legislation or whatever, that we wouldn't get funds because we're not as needy right now. That might be one time when they care more about need than the fact that we've been very fiscally responsible all this time with our low cost per pupil.
So to me, it sounds like the clawing back of a portion of our funding from the ed fund is kind of off the table. I wouldn't say 100% because I think everything is still somewhat on the table. That kind of seems like my understanding right now. If I had to guess, and judging by the conversations I've had with Brad James, the Agency of Ed, the State Department, and our VASBO group, the state is probably going to either borrow money and pay it back over a term of time to fill this hole, or they're going to adjust some of the other revenues that they have more flexibility on. And I know VASBO, my professional group that I belong to, has written a formal letter requesting that the Agency of Ed file a waiver allowing flexibility for 3 years. So not just 1 year, but 3 years to use our carryover funds as we see appropriate without having to go to the voters to ask for that. Typically your carryover funds have to be audited before you can utilize them, which is why we always skip a year. But that, to me, that is a really good suggestion for schools that have done a really great job being efficient and have really, been very fiscally responsible. Let us have that flexibility to utilize that money over the next 3 years, because this is not going to go away next year. I mean, this is going to be a long-term issue. Maybe that paired with the agency borrowing money to fill part of that hole to maybe reestablish the reserve fund and the ed fund. I don't think anything's off the table, but I guess that's why I'm asking for the hold, is because I just would like a little more information before we do anything. If that answers your question. one of the concerns is that we heard, and you probably heard this in that webinar, is that, you know, most of the time the town has to turn over the money within, I think it's 20 days, the tax revenue. If they don't receive, if people can't or don't pay their taxes, then they get 120 days to turn that money over. So that could mean we're borrowing money at the school district level for a longer period of time. And if you remember, we borrowed last year for only a short amount of time, and the interest was $30,000. So that's the concern for me, is how long will we have to borrow money for if we do need to operate until we get some tax revenue in. The good thing is, you'll notice in your financial report, our money does make money for us as well. So once we receive that revenue, I think we've received almost $75,000 worth of interest on our 37 million this year so far. So that works out. But if that happens at a much later date, then those numbers will be reversed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Peter, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, with the Vermont Principals Association canceling the spring season, are we still paying coaches for the spring season, or how is that working?
And Jay, I know you'll jump in with us well. We were lucky in that we, as a district, had not issued our contracts, our stipend agreements with coaches for the spring yet. We had not had our meeting yet, so we just froze. And there are some districts that are in a different situation, but everybody, of course, across the state has different master agreements. They have different situations with how coaches are paid and employed. But here, we did not have to do that because we did not actually have agreements with individuals yet. Jay has been in the middle of the VPA's decision around athletics. So he's got a much deeper view than I do.
No, you're spot on, Julie. Again, as she said, long story short, we had never really initiated any of our spring meetings, whether they be with coaches, whether they be with parents and players. We got lucky there. There was a considerable amount of discussion around the state. As Julie indicated, many school districts are in a lot of different places. We just chose, because we never started, not to go through with it and issue any contracts or payments.
Thank you for that update.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other questions. So at this point, I believe we can move on to new hires info.
So let me see. Well, I'm not going to present it. It is in your folder, and I'm going to open up my copy. I have been having the best parts of my days are meeting with all these teachers that your principals are working so hard to hire. It's just a joy to see people who are excited about teaching, even though the world is upside down at the moment. I'm having conversations with teachers, some of whom are coming from out of state. Today, I believe I was meeting with a teacher, yes, from Massachusetts, who is speaking to me about how they're dealing with remote learning and that they're just moving into new learning now. And so it was interesting. All the teachers I speak with, I ask them how they're going to build relationships with new students should they have to be teaching remotely in some form or another in the fall. They all have wonderful ideas. We've been very lucky. We found I met with a math teacher for MVU today that's coming with about 5 years of experience, and we're very excited about his joining us. Meeting with some special educators, met with the new after school program director. Swanton School has filled all their positions. MVU is still has a few positions to fill. We do have one transfer. from MVU to Swanton School. So we're going to have to work on that position. But it's been, given the situation we're in, it's been a pretty positive hiring season so far. I know Dan spends all his time interviewing people.
It's good that you've been able to find time, Julie. I always thought as a superintendent, that was a very important thing. That's great.
I may always do it through Google Meeting. You don't have to sit there and say, gee, when do you have time to drive to Swanton?
Right.
Or when are you next coming to Vermont? It's, you know, sometimes you can just turn around these meetings on a dime because people are teaching at home and they're able to be flexible. We send a link and we have a good conversation. I always ask people what pushes their buttons and how they compensate for it. Always get some interesting answers with those. So I really feel like we've got a great group of people coming to teach our students next year. And as we hire positions, we're going to show you, we're going to continue with this spreadsheet so that you can see the new teachers that are coming in. And Chris is signing off on contracts with remotely, like he's been doing it all his life.
Yeah. You love technology. Okay. Thank you for the info. We're on to other business. And first on that is superintendent's contract. Need a motion to approve a contract for our superintendent. Megan's the first. Do we have a second? Terry is a second. Any discussion?
Chris, question maybe for Julie. Is this a 1-year contract, 2-year contract, 3-year contract?
We haven't actually discussed it, but last year you gave me a 1-year contract.
I would like to then talk about this in executive session. I think that, you know, the district is in the past that I'm aware of done 1-year contracts, but we've had some multi-year, and I'd like to have a discussion about that tonight. Not about whether you get a contract, but whether it's a 1 or 2-year contract.
Thank you, Don.
Okay, now since we have a motion on the floor, I believe we would need a motion to table it until after executive.
I'll make that motion.
So we have a motion to table the motion to approve the superintendent's contract. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Devin's a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of tabling the previous motion on the floor, signify by saying aye, or wait, raise your hand. Opposed? Motion carries 9-0. We'll table it until after executive. So at this point, the next thing is future meeting dates. Our next meeting will be another virtual meeting on May 19th at 6:30. That's all we have scheduled at this point. So at this point, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss negotiations and superintendent's contract. And we're going to invite in for negotiations, Julie. Is anybody else, or
Probably Laura. Sorry, Laura.
so Julie and Laura, and then probably just the board for the superintendent contract.
Okay.
So do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Peter's the first, second. Megan's the second. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor of going into executive session at 8:04, signify by saying aye or raise your hand.
Chris? Chris, question. I'd like to have Devin be in when we do Julie's contract. So I don't know how you want to do it.
Yeah, Don, I'll hang around my email here so that Julie can stay on to do and Laura to do the contract negotiations. And if somebody just sends me an email, I'll hop back in for the other
Okay,
piece.
great. That's important. You'll be involved. Thank you.
Well, he doesn't have to go out on this one, does it? It's not the teacher's contract.
Well, we do need to discuss the teacher's contract as well. The teacher's negotiations.
So yeah, I do want to be part of the support staff negotiation. Just the teacher's contract, I'll step out.
So what we'll do is we'll do the teachers first, and then as soon as we're done that, we'll email Devin. Okay.
Perfect. All right.
All right.
Now
Well,
I'm
we're
gonna
in the-
stop.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
We've come out of executive session at 8:32, and we have a couple motions we need to go through. First one we'll do is the superintendent's contract. Megan and Terry started the motion, and we tabled it. So, Megan?
So I'd like to make a motion. Well, do I just have to accept an adjusted motion?
You're amending your first motion because we never had a length of contract. Just adding length of contract to your motion.
Okay, so then I would like to amend the motion to include the 2-year length of contract with the payment terms as outlined in the budget and initial contract.
Terry, you second?
And I'll second that, yes.
Perfect. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Or raise your hand. Opposed? Motion carries 9-0. Okay, next motion. Thank you. Next motion is to approve the agreement, support staff agreement. Peter's the first. Devin's the second. All those in favor of approving the support staff agreement as discussed in executive, raise your hand. Opposed? Motion carries 9-0.
Chris, I was fading out of the first motion, so I didn't hear it. I just want to make sure that I got counted as voting for the extension of the contract for the superintendent.
Yep, you did. I thought I saw you raise your hand, so I counted you.
I couldn't hear. I didn't know what happened. So, but thank you.
Yep. Okay, at this point, we've gone through our agenda. Is there anything anybody wants to add before I entertain a motion to adjourn? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Peter's a first, second.
Second.
Megan's a second. All those in favor of adjourning at 8:35, signify by saying aye or raise your hand. Motion carries 9-0. We are adjourned.